My name is Peter Duffy. I work at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. My job title is Learning Designer. So in essence, I work with staff in supporting the use of technology in pedagogically appropriate ways. As you will have realized, the case study we're looking at today for my presentation deals with Second Life. Firstly, in order to get a sense of my audience, can you indicate for me if you have heard of Second Life? Heard of Second Life? Okay, if you have a first life? Is this just to see if people are awake or know the distinction? In essence, for those who maybe have a medium understanding of Second Life as opposed to First Life is where you are now in terms of the jargon. Your physical presence in the real world. Second Life is a virtual world that is at present created by a company called Linden Labs. So what I'd first of all like to introduce you in order to address this case study is first of all our student context. Now I should warn you and apologize initially, which is a strange way to start a presentation, but in part of our case study we're sort of hanging our dirty laundry out for all of you to share at this point in time. The case study involved a series of students' orientation programs for the School of Hospitality, Tourism and Management at the university where I teach. So I was only one of a member of a team that was part of this funded project. And the reason I refer to dirty laundry is the orientation program wasn't really a success. It had quite limited student use in Second Life. But I hope to share with you as we progress through our short time today, some of our lessons learned and also some of the, as a speaker mentioned yesterday, maybe a kernel of sand that was generated at our university that may produce a few pearls. So in terms of our student context, and for those of you not familiar with Hong Kong, it's a very dense population, but with a very pervasive technical infrastructure. An example of that would be there's more than 100% uptake of mobile phones. In other words, many people would have more than one, which relates to the previous speaker's interest in mobile learning. And in terms of the university where I teach, it's the largest university in Hong Kong, not in terms of size, but in terms of student population. At present, however, in Hong Kong, only about 16 to 17% of students go on to higher education, which is clearly something that the government is looking to address. So in essence, based on the limited understanding of people that they indicated at the beginning of the session on an understanding of have you heard of Second Life, I'd like to first of all look at what are virtual worlds as a brief introduction to our case study. So in essence, a virtual world is a computer-based simulated environment intended for, and I'll just read from the slide, users to inhabit and interact using avatars. Virtual worlds are also called digital worlds, simulated worlds, and MUVEs, or a multi-user virtual environment. They are different than a simulation and different than a game, and in some very important ways, in that they are fairly open-ended, where users choose the outcome and the activity as part of their exploration through Second Life. The unique qualities of a virtual world and some of the reasons why we adopted Second Life, I'll go into a little bit further in a moment, but really these are the areas we identified that particularly suited our choice of an orientation program for Hong Kong students. They offer a rich sensory immersive experience, an authentic context, activities for experiential learning, simulation and role play, modeling of complex scenarios, a platform for data visualization and opportunities for collaboration and co-creation. And these can't be easily experienced in other platforms. A while ago, I read something that talked about 3D virtual environments and how at a certain point in time, if the virtual environment is too realistic, the user focuses more on the slight distinctions between the virtual environment that are different from the real world. So Second Life doesn't claim to be an exact duplication of the real world, and certainly has some issues which we'll identify in a moment. But one of the reasons we use this is because we felt it had many possibilities in an educational sense. some of the common features of a virtual world relate to it has a shared space. So the world allows many users to participate at once. It has a typical graphic user interface, and I don't know if there's representatives from Second Life here, but the interface is most commonly accepted as not being very good or user-friendly at the moment, to some degree. It has a sense of immediacy in that the interaction takes place in real time. Similar, I suppose, to an old mode or a chat room is some similarity there. It has a lot of interactivity in that the users can, in essence, alter, develop, and build content. It offers persistence in that the world continues to exist, Second Life, irrespective of how often you log on, how often you go there. Clearly, though, if everybody was absent in Second Life, they would have a limited impact and continue to grow in limited ways. It offers many opportunities for socialization and community. The world allows and encourages the formation of in-world groups, and there are a number of these that are present. So, a very quick overview of Second Life. It's an online 3D world created by a company, Linden Labs, provides an immersive environment for users to play and interact, and it's the size of a small city in that thousands of servers, or what they refer to as simulators, exist to provide interactions for the users. This is just a very brief introduction to Second Life, provided by YouTube, of course, if it's video online. I may need some help here to get the sound to play, if that's possible. Or if not, it doesn't matter. Is possible for sound? The sound isn't completely necessary. It's really just background music to the video that's showing. Okay, so the short video presents an overview of some of the features of Second Life for those people who haven't seen it before. In essence, you can create objects, buildings, environments fairly easily with a basic programming understanding. The project that we worked on as part of this case study actually funded some technical staff to assist with this. It offers the ability to represent yourself in various ways, as I'll illustrate in a moment, and also the ability to customize the space, the physical environment, most commonly referred to as islands in Second Life. So some of the basics of Second Life are you can create your own avatar. The behavior is engaged but not constrained, in that you can offer many opportunities for students to interact in various different ways depending on the avatar, the appearance that they choose. There are really no material costs in terms of once you're in Second Life. You need to buy the space, the physical, or the virtual, I suppose, server space, and the physical server and the virtual space associated with that. But in terms of once you've got this space, you can go there for a free cost. So in terms of registering, also registration is free at the moment. In terms of your avatar, you can represent yourself in an entirely different way than what you appear in real life, as is depicted on the photo here. Clearly, in terms of educational possibilities, some of the literature talks about using Second Life to represent able-bodied, an avatar that has able-bodied characteristics for someone with some physical disabilities. Offers role-play scenarios where you could ask students to take on a different role and so on. Most of the communication is through chat or instant messaging. At the moment, you can now do voice and has some video integration. The interesting characteristic of the voice communication is that in Second Life, if this lecture theatre was presented in Second Life, say for example someone at the very back of the lecture theatre is talking in the virtual world of Second Life, because the person sitting next to you is closer to you, in terms of their avatar is closer to you, their voice will be louder for you. Okay, if I'm further away, my voice appears more distant. So it offers a sense of presence that is a lot different than instant messaging per se. Most of the movement in Second Life deals with walking, flying around. You can teleport like Star Trek from one location to another. You can move from one location to another location through what they call an SURL, or a Second Life URL. So you can, in the same way you identify bookmarks in the internet, you can identify bookmarks in the virtual world of Second Life as places to visit. As I mentioned, you can rent or buy land. These are mentioned for permanent sort of structures. However, you can create, depending on the access of different spaces, your own sort of buildings and objects and so on. Most of the objects are made out of a basic building block, or called a prim in the technical jargon of Second Life. So it's a rosy virtual world, but there are some problems. There are technical hurdles to deal with in terms of some bandwidth limitations. Some of our students found, for example, they would go to a certain location, and then when they initially went there, whilst the virtual space was rendering, or in other words displaying the buildings and characteristics that were there, they weren't aware of these spaces as walls maybe that were blocking them, so they were frustrated with some of these experiences. Also, it's a little bit like real life, or the internet in general, in that at the moment Second Life as an area has some of the same issues in a virtual sense that the real world has. It's quite interesting. A colleague was relating the other day that for whatever reason someone had managed to put his avatar, his representation in Second Life, into a cage, and he was quite frustrated by this. He didn't know what to do, and then he realized obviously he can just log out and log back in again. But he had a great sense of personal involvement with his avatar being in some way interfered with by someone else in this virtual world. So in the same way as an educator you would model, scaffold, interact with students in different ways and lead them through an experience in using the internet, the Second Life offers similar possibilities. There are offshoots of Second Life, one called Teen Life, specific for teenagers, where they've done more to mitigate these sort of problems. I should qualify as well, I'm by no means an expert in Second Life. I'm simply presenting to you our specific case study. So I'm really just a resident exploring some new ideas that were particular to our intent in offering an orientation program in Second Life for our students that related also to a physical orientation program. So there were some tasks that were associated with both the physical world and the virtual world. I don't know if you've seen diagrams similar to this. It's a little PowerPoint faux pas in that you probably can't read some of the categories along the bottom there. Just to read them for you, and this is typical from the Gartner Research Group, which talks about the hype cycle of some new technologies. They talk about that most new technology goes through, first of all, some technology trigger, some way of starting some interest in these areas. From there, it goes through the peak of inflated expectation, where people think virtual worlds will solve world hunger, will solve everything to do with education that we can possibly envision at this point in time. And then obviously reality sets in, and innovation goes through what they describe as the trough of disillusionment. Okay, these things don't do what we thought they would, and we're not happy about it. From there, it goes through the slope of enlightenment, and lastly, ideally, reaches the plateau of productivity, in which case some of these newer technologies are becoming no longer innovative, but becoming everyday and are used in accepted, effective pedagogical ways. And clearly not all technologies reach the plateau of productivity. But it is envisioned that Second Life, or virtual worlds per se, will have a future role to play in our educational experiences. So it's currently got a registered population of about 13 million. Obviously these are not all live, and clearly when they see a registered population, in theory, as one person I could register 2 or 3 different accounts. So it doesn't necessarily equate a one-to-one real person to a Second Life person. The statistics generated by Linden Lab indicate that from over 100 countries, most concentrations in North America, Germany, the UK, they indicate that when people register, you can indicate your gender, but in the same way that I register for any internet site, I can say I'm female, I can say I'm male. So it depends on what statistics you provide to the system. So there are many universities in particular and educational institutions using Second Life for various reasons. I was quite pleased in the opening presentation by Professor Moore to see that he referred to Second Life as something in terms of maybe where we are looking, where we're heading, in terms of his precursor for where we've been. I'm going to click through these fairly quickly, and the intent here is just to give you a snapshot of many possibilities for Second Life. They're used in medical situations, where obviously to be able to virtually interact with a patient is in some way safer and more easily accomplished in Second Life for students. Libraries in particular using Second Life quite a lot. Language teaching, where they ask students to consider the implications of different languages. Building and real estate obviously lends itself to this area where you can create your own architectural experience. Computing for visualization. Tourism and travel is a little bit new wave at this point in time, not that common in Second Life, but certainly it's becoming more useful. Clothing and textiles design, where you can model in a virtual space some of your designs. And in essence, the context of Second Life in the School of Hospitality, Tourism and Management was part of a project initiated by a gentleman called Paul Penfold and his team. My role within the project, as I mentioned at the beginning, was learning designer. So I offered some assistance in terms of the program and how it related to their pedagogical intent. It was piloted and tested as part of a virtual program. They built a virtual hotel, and then they realized that they've spent considerable amount of money in their custom designed virtual hotel, and they realized that for a lot less money they could have accomplished a similar experience in Second Life. So part of the intent behind involving students in this virtual orientation was to test the waters a little bit in terms of what would occur. So it's an open source solution in that I mentioned registration is free at the moment, but also there is some cost involved in the land, but not very much. The paper mentioned several goals in why we took on Second Life. In essence, we identified it was more cost effective. It would provide a similar 3D experience to a virtual hotel that they'd built previously. Would encourage some exploration of this for teaching staff as well who are involved in the orientation, and would support real-world scenarios for the students in terms of teaching and learning as a future student in hospitality and tourism. This is a snapshot of our virtual campus with a series of buildings. This is one of the mentors that were part of the program, flying around basically looking for students who are in trouble. So the orientation program involved three main areas, one to do with certain activities, one to do with in-world consultations, and one that was sort of open-ended, generally identified as places of interest. We identified, in terms of Second Life, from a pedagogical perspective, why we would take this on. Some of these are previously mentioned as generic to Second Life. The idea of social presence, self-identity, teachers as a central and key figure in this role, that it would enhance our students' learning experience, and that uses learning methods that could motivate students and help them achieve certain results and interactions in this world. So now the bad news. What didn't work? In essence, we did do the research. We did identify, and we have a number of years of experience in assisting students and teachers with technology. But you know, the use of Second Life for our orientation program for students was different. Okay, it was a new experience for us, for the teachers that were involved, and also for the students. So we, in hindsight, identified 6 areas that we thought were moments in the orientation program that we could have done things a little bit differently. First of all, we felt, and whether this is particular to Second Life, particular to our use of it as a part of an orientation program for students, orientation program meaning their introduction to university life, introduction to PolyU, introduction to the School of Hospitality, Tourism and Management. So we identified that we needed to make students more aware and more in-depth understanding of the relationship of the virtual to the real. It was voluntary also. It was part of a series of activities that were planned, but students weren't told they had to be involved in this, which is maybe another dilemma. There were some technical issues in that Second Life forces you, when you first go there, after registering, to go through their Help Island, their orientation program. And a number of students got stuck in Help. Okay, from Help Island, it was expected they would then go to our virtual campus and interact with the activities. But quite a number of them got to the Help Island, realized they could do things like completely change their physical appearance as it appeared in the world. So they spent a long time doing their hair and choosing different clothes and making their avatar appear to be a certain way, and got caught up in these sort of things rather than in some of the activities we really wanted them to. We wanted to also incorporate a greater sense of the orientation program as beneficial to students, related to their introduction to university. We had developed what we called a PolyU SOTEL presence, which is the virtual campus. But then we realized we also needed to mentor students through this virtual campus. This occurred maybe a few minutes, maybe about a week after we started students using this. So we realized we had to put in place mentors that were physical people who took on an avatar to help students through our virtual campus. They had a series of tasks or missions to complete in which they were awarded points, and based on the points they got rewards and gifts. So there was some awareness that we needed to clarify some of these tasks that the students were expected to do. Obviously they were aware of the task because we did, after the first week, mentor them through the first 2, and then after that there were a number of other ones that they were expected to work through. And the last one, we realized that students' time in the virtual world doesn't usually correspond with the lecturer's time, in that the lecturers were asked to provide some online consultation in Second Life. And most often that would occur during the day. And most often students would be in Second Life at night. So the lecturer would be there waiting for students to appear to offer them some insight into maybe plagiarism at university was one of the topics. And then students would be online at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, 2 in the morning, which is fairly typical for a Hong Kong student, expecting some consultation to be there. But obviously the mismatch in timing and schedule was there. I'll just read for you the second quote, because I think it was particularly relevant to our experience. Being on the bleeding edge can be painful for both the learners and the facilitator. Several students couldn't log into Second Life due to the lab computers. Several people got disconnected on occasion, including me, which is from the author, and it was difficult for some folks to navigate in Second Life. So what we felt was it required a far greater role of modeling and mentorship in the use of this virtual world for our program. I don't know if you've seen this illustration before, but this highlights for me that, technologies really don't create a learning experience. They are an enabling force, okay, and used well and with a number of different considerations can work very effectively in education. I don't know how well you can see the cartoon from the back, but the person striding ahead is technology. The figure hanging on is education. And a colleague recently suggested that maybe the dust under the boots of technology are educators, okay, the teachers involved in implementing technology. I think rather than be the dust underneath this sort of area, we can consider the use of these different technological possibilities as they emerge in higher education, specific to our context. One of the key parting thoughts I'll leave you with is our experience in using Second Life wasn't everything we thought it would be in terms of this orientation program. It did, however, generate two very key and crucial things. One, it promoted an awareness of the use of Second Life, these virtual worlds, amongst a number of educators in our school that weren't aware of these possibilities before. Okay, they had a chance to interact with these as part of the program. The second thing that emerged was now we have, how many? I think there's 6 different faculties represented in a poly-U-wide project to look at Second Life in a more substantive way at our university. And this proposal put forward by 6 different faculties probably would not have occurred if we didn't get a chance to make these mistakes initially. If we didn't get a chance to have this time to look at what works for us in terms of a Hong Kong context particular to our students. So thank you very much for your time.